pretty handy things really, because if we didn't have rules, we'd spend a lot of time in the shed repairing boats. And it does also give us a great excuse to yell at one another. That's what rules are all about. One thing about the rules is the fact that in almost every rule there is an obligation on one party or the other to keep clear, which also means there's an obligation to prove that you've done that. So the further you go, you've also got to think of, I've got to prove I had an overlap here. Can I do that? No. Bail out. The idea is to stop boats hitting one another. Also, the idea is to use them tactically, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's also about your obligation to keep clear of other boats. There's very little in the rules that says you have right of way. There's lots in the rules that says you shall keep clear. Port and starboard. The port tack boat shall keep clear of the starboard tack boat. Fairly simple. So if you don't keep clear, the starboard tack boat says I had to change my course, or I had to tack, and clearly the obligation is on the port tack boat to prove that that didn't happen. And believe me, once you get in a little room with the produce committee, that's not very easy to do. So always bear that in mind. If you look at windward leeward, the windward boat has to prove that it kept clear. Its contact, tough. Your chance of proving that the other guy did something wrong are not very high. So the obligation obviously is on the windward boat to actually do that. Bruce is the best at it. He tells everyone to get up, get out of there. So whenever it goes to the protest, he says, I warned him 3 times and he still didn't get up. What chance have you got of avoiding that? One of the best calls I ever heard was I had the Olympic squad sailing etchels on the river, and it was just a tactical thing. It was just no boat speed, not a lot of boat speed. But you can imagine about 8 etchels coming down to a leeward mark, and Dennis Jones hands the helm to his crew member, walks to the back of the boat, looks across the back of the boat and says, you have, and you have, and the rest of you can all go and get... So, what chance have you got of forcing a passage in there and then proving it in a protest battle? None. You're sitting 20 feet further back. This guy looked across the transom. You'd have absolutely no chance of proving that. So everybody didn't claim room. It was a great call. So if you make it obvious from the start, you're starting to look much better. The rules are quite simple. They're not difficult. Port and starboard, we all know that one. That's easy. Windward leeward, windward boat has to keep clear of the leeward boat. That's fairly simple. Clear ahead and clear astern. Clear ahead and clear astern. We'll talk about that for a moment. Good. We'll choose another one. The line is taken from the aftmost point, perpendicular to the aftmost point of the boat. Now, if it happened to be one of the old gaff riggers and things like that had booms sticking out way back here somewhere, then the line is then at the back of that. That's a normal piece of rigging in its normal position. So that's the criteria of clear ahead and clear astern. Behind that line or in front of that line. If you're in front of that line, the 2 boats are overlapped. If you're behind that line, they're not overlapped, you're clear astern. Therefore you have to give way. The other trick to that, of course, is usually the overtaking boat that's pushing for an overlap And as such, he's also going from being the boat with the obligation to keep clear, and he's then trying to go from that obligation into the obligation of putting the obligation on the other boat to give him room to go around the mark or whatever it may be. At that point of changeover of obligations, the boat that gained the advantage, the overtaking boat in this particular case, would have to give the other boat room and opportunity to keep clear. We had talked about an incident at a leeward mark some time back. Leeward mark was here, two boats not overlapped, like so. Coming into the leeward mark, the first boat went round the mark, tacked on the port. Very dangerous thing to do, but that's what he did. The second boat came around and came up here and had to pull away to avoid this port tack boat. After talking to Glenn and a few other people, the ruling there was the right-of-way boat here was altering course, or going up and rounding up and rounding the mark. Therefore he had to give the port tack boat here room and opportunity to keep clear, which he actually did. He actually avoided it, didn't hit him, he actually pulled away and went behind him. So that's fine, there's no incident in actual fact, but the situation would have been different if this boat had gone another couple of boat lengths up here, then he would have been nailed, because the other boat would have been on a steady starboard tack course, coming through here, and he would have been done for dinner. One rule that I often see broken, quite often badly, is tacking in someone's water. There are two port tack boats. This guy decides to tack on the starboard tack because he'll be right once he's on starboard tack. He then sails up to head the breeze. Perfectly allowable, he's luffing, he's giving the other guy room and opportunity to keep clear, that's fine. The moment he starts to tack, once he goes beyond the head to breeze, he is then under obligation to give way to the other guy no matter what happens. So from there, around to here, when he gets on the, oh, that's done it.
Been at the gym plenty, swum 3 times this week.
Anyway, once he gets on the ley line here, where it's a normal windward course, the sails don't have to be full, no other requirement, he just has to be on that course. Then this guy coming in has to have time to think, act and avoid him. It doesn't often happen. You think about this boat coming in here, he gets thinking time, reaction time and avoiding time. So if he has to pull away down here and misses you, that's probably fine. Tries to tack underneath you and hits you, that's probably not so fine. The onus of proof is on this bloke, not this bloke. He has to prove that he actually tacked and was on his starboard tack course and gave the other boat room and opportunity to keep clear at that moment before he's clean and away.
Isn't that a bit subjective?
It's very subjective. There's been any number of protests on it, and any number of appeals on it, and it's not very often the boat was tacked as one. Okay.
The other guy's got very slow reactions.
Well, it normally happens worse than that. You know, like the port tack boat's normally sort of out here somewhere. You know, And he's like, I've got room here, I'll tack. But, you know, while he's tacking and doing all that, this guy has no obligation at all to make any course change until he's actually in that position. Once he's in that position, then he has an obligation to try and avoid it. If he doesn't, I wouldn't like to be this bloke in a progress group.
So what's the obligation of the bloke on a port tack then?
Sorry?
What's the obligation of the bloke on a port tack?
The bloke on port tack just keeps sailing. He's on port tack until this guy gets onto his starboard tack course. He has no obligation at all. Once that guy's on the starboard tack course, then he has an obligation to try and avoid it. But including in that obligation is time to think about it and actually do it. Now, you know, a lot of boats are travelling fairly quickly and it won't happen. Not, you know, as I say, it's not very often that the starboard tacker, the boat that tacked onto starboard, wins that program.
So what you do as soon as you felt you were on starboard, you'd yell out, "I'm on starboard."
That would help. You're in the yeah. You know, that would help. But
It used
you
to
know,
be fallen by. Wasn't the term fallen by used in that? In
well,
other words,
the Yanks are always at you to say, hold your course and speed. That's what they always tell you. So,
yeah,
you know,
but once you've tacked onto the starboard, you had to be fallen by. In other words,
basically, yes.
yeah, that was the terminology. Now
Yeah,
you're
that's right.
just saying the boat has to be there. Never
Yeah.
mind about the sails.
No, the sails don't matter. Yeah, just the heading of the boat, and that is, you know, as Bruce said,
Yeah.
very subversive. And of course,
Agreed.
while it is very subversive, it really doesn't help this bloke who's obliged to keep clear.
Yeah.
He's suffering under rule 11 or 12, whatever it is, tacking, and as such he has absolutely no rights until he is actually on that tack. So he is the boat that has to prove that he did actually achieve the deed without upsetting the starboard tackle, the port tackle.
But during the course of that manoeuvre, the fact that he's on starboard at some stage doesn't really matter because he has to allow room for the port tackle. The fact that he's going onto starboard when he's on starboard, he still can't claim starboard rights because it's all about the distance between him and the other boat.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer to this, if you're the leeward boat, as long as you're fairly close to it, the trick then is to get up to as close as you can to it. You know, so you're better off slowing down and going sailing high, and get right up under it, and then you can, you know, literally force him to tack. He doesn't want to sit there pinching like mad to sail above you. So, you know, unless you're, you know, heading into a lane line for a mark or something like that, he'll tack and get out. He'll probably give you a few very sound words of advice when he does it, but he will actually probably do it, which is what you want. Mark roundings, windward mark roundings. Windward marks. Magic 4 boat length circle around that mark. When you get to windward mark, you'll actually cross over the white line in the water that says this is 4 boat lengths. The idea is to stop the congestion at the windward mark. So, starboard tacker coming in here, he's been on starboard tack and laying the mark from outside the 4 boat length circle. Port tacker comes in, I'll get in front of him, I'll tack here, like so. And I'll get round the mark in front of him. That situation is fine. He may even get round the mark in front of him. Now starboard tack is a little lower than that. It comes in on this line. The time he's tacked is going to be here. This boat can't sail above a close haul course at this stage. If he forces the starboard tacker to sail above close haul, he's committed a foul. Now the idea is to stop boats actually doing that. To do that, they've given the starboard tacker absolute rights virtually. And what's more, if there's 2 or 3 starboard tackers, there, any one of those boats which are overlapped is forced above close haul, he's done like a dinner. So it's not a good thing to approach the windward mark on port tack. One of the things I used to say to the guys when I went in to do this, first rounding of a big championship heat, never come in on port tack. Always overstand. I know a couple of blokes who went from 2nd place to 81st place in the Tornado World Championship heat one day. And Noel Robbins did the same sort of thing. I commiserated with him over exactly the same sort of stupidity. And it's just greed. We went in there and we thought that's a right, we'll tack underneath this guy and we'll get round first. It's just greedy stupidity. We rushed in there, we tacked underneath the guy and got gassed by him and didn't make the mark, so we pulled away, jibed, went around, did it again. And we did it the second time we tried to tack under the fleet, which is now the iron bar and starboard tack. That didn't work either. So we had 3 goes at it and eventually we got round 2nd last. Not a good thing to do, I can assure you. So while we're talking about that, there's a few things that, a few areas in a boat race that you've got to think about. The other day we set a course which had a single windward mark, like so. And all the boats came in, the whole line of boats came in on starboard tack here. Now that meant that any area in this area wasn't a good place to be, because you're going to have to bump these guys on port tack to come back into it. Now that wasn't a good place to be. And to make matters worse, all the starboard tackers came round the mark and jibed on starboard tack. Another jibe coming down here. So that meant you couldn't be in here either, because you were going to get nailed by these guys and those guys. So basically it turned out to be a one-way track windward beat. Out there and up there. Anything else was going to get you in big, big trouble, which proved to be the case on a couple of occasions. So that's really just a case of thinking the course out before you get in there.
Can we just clarify, Roland?
Sorry?
When you say the port tacker coming in cannot force the starboard tacker beyond head to wind or to head to wind, if the starboard tacker has overstood the mark and he's eased off and is coming down onto the mark, can the port tacker still go in there?
Yes, the port tacker can sail a normal windward course. Going into the windward mark, he can sail a normal windward course, but he cannot sail above that to such an extent that it forces the starboard tacker to sail above a normal windward course.
Right, so if you see the starboard tacker has eased off because he's overstood it.
So if you're really clever and you're on starboard on the outside of him, you get your crew weeds your jib out a little bit so it luffs. You call everyone's attention to the fact that the jib's luffed. And your progress.
It does say close haul, doesn't it? Warren,
Going.
it does say close haul.
Sorry?
It's on a close haul. And close haul is not necessarily your highest type thing.
I think it says, normal close haul position.
It doesn't mean you have to be really tied up.
Some boats point higher than others, yes, I agree to that, but if you think about it on a 20 metre thing into the finish, it's not going to make a lot of difference, is it?
Now going back to that that situation was within the circle.
In the 4 boatman circle.
Righto, let's do it just on the outside of the circle.
Well, then normal rules apply. If you have the windward mark up here, and our 4 boatman circle round here, for example, you're coming in on starboard.
And you haven't got to the
port tacker comes in here and tacks here.
Yes.
Then we're talking about exactly the same rules applying as when he tacks the 2 port tack boats. Now, this guy has the rights. He's tacking, so he has absolutely no rights whatsoever.
Yes, but after
and he's got to prove that he kept clear.
Yes, he's kept clear and he's the leeward boat.
Yes.
And he's just outside the circle.
Yes.
What can he do now? He can luff up.
He can luff up, yes. Yeah, he can luff up. But he's got to give this guy room and opportunity to keep clear when he doesn't.
Yeah.
Yes, so no sharp luffs.
Well, you're not allowed to do that anymore, so you used to be able to just slam the helm down and
well, no, explain that please. Explain that please. That's a serious point. If you want to expand on that, would be good.
Well,
I mean,
over in Canada one year, Gordon Ingate, who was a gold medalist in that effect, he was sailing tempests, and he didn't put his spinnaker up on one of the reaches. And as every boat went past, he luffed them up and protested against them, and he knocked out about a third of the fleet. What a clever thing to do, because I don't think Gordon finished another race in that series without being protested against. The whole fleet just dumped on him. Anyway, getting to Peter's point, and this point here, you've got a starboard tacker coming into the mark. You've got a guy that's tacked quite rightfully and now on the starboard tack down here. This guy's probably got a bit more room. He then becomes, quite simply, the overtaking boat. So the obligation on him at this stage is to keep clear. This guy can actually, once he gets going, luff up if he wants to. He can change course up to here. So, cannot pass head to wind. Luffs up and goes past head to wind, then he's tacking and he's lost any rights that he may well have had. So as long as it's outside the 4 boatman circle,
let me go ahead of you.
Free range applies. It's just normal windward, leeward, overtaking, not overtaking, standard rules. The whole idea of this is to stop the port tank boat. One of the things with things like solings and actuals and things like that that carry their way is they used to come in, the whole row of starboard tackers, you know, goes out to here. Infinity, they'd come in on port, tack at the last minute, foul the starboard tacker, around the mark, do a turn, and disappear. If you're on a 50 or 60 boat fleet, you've already passed 40 off them, so that's pretty good going. It's just no problem. So the whole idea of this thing was to avoid anybody doing that. Then they also brought in the rule that said, do a turn and you still have an advantage, you've got to do another one until the advantage is gone. And that tends to stop that sort of thing happening. Third mark rounding is always contentious. The rule quite specifically is the guy that claims to have an overlap has to prove it. I had a very interesting protest hearing years ago between Gordon Lucas and John Cassidy. They're both sailing fireballs. Professional crews, both of them. They both came into the protest panel and they both gave absolutely exemplary stories that they did or didn't have an overlap depending which boat you happened to be sitting on. I think from memory I disqualified Gordon. He said to me after, he said, you know, why did I get rubbed? I said, well, quite simply, you claimed the overlap, you didn't prove it. Simple as that. You were at the hearing, you heard all the evidence. I said, there was nothing in that evidence that said you had an overlap. The only people who said you had an overlap were you and your crew, and the other two said you didn't.
Well, also worked out.
Your obligation is to prove you did. You didn't prove that, therefore you're disqualified.
Sailors don't lie.
Well, I mean, I chaired a protest panel with Noel Robbins, and I can't remember who the other party was. And it was exactly on the Windward Mark thing, and there were two solings. And I went up the Windward Mark, Noel checked underneath him, and I think there was I'm not sure where the mast hit. There was a collision anyway. And it was all going swimmingly well. Both sides were giving very, very good evidence for their own side. That was fine. And eventually I turned around to the sheet hand, I think, and I said, what did you do after you attacked? And he said, oh, he said, I just attacked. I said, did you get over the side? He said, no, he said, there wasn't room. Oh dear. So it's just simply, you know, too close. It's just quite simple. Third mark round. Oh, let's get out of there. Votes coming in on whatever job you like, it really doesn't matter. We have our magic 4-boat circle again. Whichever of these boats breaks that circle first, as soon as they break the circle, then it's dependent on whether the windward boat has an overlap or not. Let's draw it slightly differently. Windward boat here, windward boat here. He breaks the circle, there's an overlap, obviously. He has rights to go to the mark. In this particular case, this guy is clear ahead as well. So once he's clear ahead, they get down the mark. This boat has to give him room to go around the mark. Now, Bruce and I were going down the mark the other day, and I thought we were, he thought we were, but it didn't matter much. Both tumbling down here, somehow like that. Bruce was clever. When he got to the circle, he actually pulled away.
It's supposed to be going around this starboard.
Yeah, it was the other way around, but it doesn't matter. So that immediately he broke the circle, he pulled away. You look at that, therefore the overlap's broken, therefore there's no right.
You dirty quick,
So we had a little yelling match on the grounds that I thought I was already inside the 4-boat length circle. But then having to prove it to the protest panel is not all that easy, so I gave Bruce room and that was no problem at all. We went on our way. So the trick is it's 4-boat lengths. Guy that's got the overlap at the 4-boat lengths gets room around the mark. He gets room to do a normal, seaman-like ramming. Now he can't do things like, you know, what we all like to do, come in wide and come up the throat. Doesn't get room to do that. Gets room to sail to the mark, go round the mark and sail away.
that one again. Warren, can we have that one again? That wide rounding at the bottom mark. When we get the easterly course and we come down here to the shore, and we've got a buoy just off the beach here, the buoys there, we get blokes right out here that go like that. Are we supposed to go like that?
It depends who has the inside, who has to give room to whom. The guys in front assume he's in front of the other boat. He can sail his proper course. Now his proper course is the course that would allow him to finish the race in the shortest possible time. Now if he wants to sail out here somewhere because there's a better tide or whatever, and he can prove that to the protest panel, then that's his proper course. But in this particular case, if we extrapolate that backwards a bit,
Hey, get out of here.
we had boats here. He can actually stay fairly wide and come up fairly close. Like so. This bloke playing the boat behind has to get him round to sail around the mark. The fact that he started out here is his business. The only time when a seaman like mounting applies is when the two boats are overlapping. So, you know, that's a couple of things that drive me as a coach mad when I saw it. People come round the leeward mark here, and around the leeward mark, like so, and about here, they shoot everything in half. And then go round the mark, the centre plates, the keel or the centre plate stalls, the sails stall, and eventually they stagger off out here somewhere. The guy who does it right by actually not overshooting here will end up about here. Years ago we did an experiment, it was with 420s I think from memory, and we had guys going in, and the trick was if you went round the mark with your sails eased almost to the point of luffing, it was much quicker than those people who went round the mark and slammed the sheeting in hard. If you think about accelerating a boat, you never pull the sheets in hard. You know, when you want to get it going, you slowly pull the sheets in and work it up. If you tacked a 12 metre, for example, and pulled the sheets in hard, it would never ever get up to its maximum hull speed. You had to release the sheets out and get it, work it up to a hull speed and then shoot it straight up. So it's you know, a horrible thing to see when you see people doing that, so don't. You know, by all means come around here, if your sails flap even, it's probably quicker than overshooting. Any questions on that?
Not on that, Warren, but just in the 4 metre circle around the marks. Given that remote control sailors can barely see where they are in relation to the mark, have you any advice for approaching marks where there's a lot of boats together and it's difficult to see whether you're within a 4 metre range and let alone how close you are to another boat? Is there a sort of practical advice? I mean,
you're probably talking to the worst bloke in this group. Today I hit Bruce, Bob, Graham, Jim. Oh, sorry. I think I hit everybody around the leeward mark today. I can't see that far, so you know, people unfortunately were fair game. But yeah, no, I have no answer to that. I'm sorry. I don't know how you judge that. It's a judgment thing, and it's not a problem on real boats because you're there. You can see it and sense it. It's a problem for us because we're not there. You know, we're a long way away. The easy answer to that is, you know,
do your best to keep out of the way.
Be cautious. You're better off avoiding someone than hitting them. A classic thing that happens when two boats are beating is you get a starboard tacker coming through and a port tacker coming across. What should the port tacker do?
Good way.
You assume he's on port tack because he thinks it's the favoured tack. Therefore, this is not the favoured tack. he pulls away gradually and goes behind the starboard tacker. As he goes through here, he'll get a lift off the starboard tacker because the starboard tacker's bending the breeze, like so. So he'll get a lift there as he comes through, and he will remain on his favourite tack with minimal effort. The other result is, if you try to bugger this, I'll tack. The tacker marches along, and because he's been going, he eventually gets to the situation where he's almost taken this guy's lift. So then they start a pinching competition and they both slow down. No one wins at all. But eventually, this guy's got to eventually tack back and cross these guys again. So, you know, much better to do the dirty deed here when he's got room and time and, you know, it's easy. Just ease the gear a bit, come down, you know, judge it nicely, go behind him, crank it up as you go past this person, you just crank it up and get a little lift and, you know, the cost is minimal. The cost otherwise could be catastrophic.
Now once he's crossed his transom, the other boat cannot tack.
If it's crossed the transom, the other boat can tack, yeah.
Can't tack and cover him. I thought once you dodge the back of a starboard.
Once he's dodged the back of him, this guy can tack as well if he wants to.
Well, where does that come in on the?
He wants to tack.
If the starboard
gone through there, this guy wants to tack. He's more than welcome to do so. But what's going to happen is this guy will be going fast, and he'll eventually come up underneath this bloke and give him carry.
Now,
so
I take it on the other hand, the port tack coming in sings out "Hold your course" and goes behind. Still has no right to stop him from tacking?
No. As long as the guy that tacks doesn't cause the port tack boat to change course, it's not a problem.
Okay, the starboard tack is approaching the port tack in the event that it's going to be closed. If he calls, hold your course to the port tack, now the port tack can't cover.
If he calls hold your course, the port tack boat calls hold your course.
No, if the starboard calls, hold your course. In other words, he's going to duck the port tack. The other hand.
I see, I'm with you. Yep, okay. It depends where you're sailing, but I wouldn't trust him.
Well, I understood that you couldn't throw over the top of a port tacker, over the top of a starboard tacker.
What you're relying on is the starboard tacker to give you room to cross it. Is that
yeah, you're allowing the starboard... No,
the port tacker to cross.
You're allowing the port tacker
to cross.
Yeah. That, once he's gone behind the starboard tacker, the port tacker can't cover.
That's correct. You'd need to know your starboard tack boat very, very well to trust him in top competition, I can tell you right now.
But isn't there a situation somewhere in the rules which says there is a circumstance where you having done something, you can't tack. You're not supposed to tack. It's bad sportsmanship. Is there such a situation anywhere where you, having done something or allowed someone else to do something, such as shoot your stern, you...
I don't think so in those sorts of circumstances, no.
Okay.
There's a number of circumstances, you know, claiming room on obstructions and things like that where there's obligations to tack and that sort of thing. But I don't think there's anywhere in the rules that says, you know, having done that, you're obliged not to tack. Yeah.
Isn't it the situation whereby if you call starboard on a port tack boat, thereafter you can't hold a course? once you call starboard on a port tack boat, you can't then alter course before he's crossed you or you've crossed him.
Not quite so. The rule says that port tack boats coming through, starboard tack boats coming through, port tack boat, the starboard tack boat can't alter course if at the first instance the port tack boat has to do something to avoid it. Well, it's fairly airy-fairy the way they word it, but that's what it says. So in other words, if you leave it till the last minute and then decide to tackle whatever you want to do, and the port tack boat has to avoid you, then you're in trouble. But if you tack, say about here probably, and the port tack boat can keep going temporarily on his course, then what you've done is okay. Now, how you sort that out in the protest hearing is beyond me. It's a bit like the Windward Mark for boat length thing of not sailing above a close full course. There's a couple of classic cases where there's 4 boats stacked up, and the last boat had the luff or something, and who's on? Well, in practical terms, that's never going to happen. Theoretically, it might be fine, but practically, it's not going to. And I wouldn't think this would happen all that often. But the trick is, as long as he doesn't have to change course immediately, then whatever you've done is fairly right.
It might happen at the start line. One boat's out on the starboard, one boat's going on the port.
Talking earlier about doing things that fall into old nasty buggers like these hands. One of the classics that is a very biased port tack start line. A whole bundle of boats out here going to start on port. My favourite trick is to reach down the line and get to here and force the first port tacker to tack, preferably on the mark. If you judge your speed and height and everything else, you can nail the first port tacker, who will automatically create chaos amongst all the rest coming through, and you simply tack and sail away. You get exactly the same situation at the weather mark if they ever bring a starboard tack rounding on a weather mark. One of the reasons why it doesn't happen very often. On the weather mark, a whole bundle of port tackers is home, normally stacked up like so. The trick is to come in here on starboard, judge your pace so that you nail the first guy. You want him. Make sure you nail him. Force him to tack. You've got to force him to tack. He'll force all the others to just leave chaos. You just sail up there, tack and disappear. So, that's one reason why we don't have starboard tack rounding at the moment. It's not a pretty sight. Well, it's probably enough for one day.
Yep.
What about the other?
Sorry?
What about the other question? You do yours?
Yeah, I've got a question. Would you care to explain the obligations on both parties when there is an obstruction and one of the parties calls for water?
All right. The easiest way is to explain it with a continued obstruction, like a seawall or something.
Yep.
Boats coming in here on starboard, a whole heap of them. This guy's sailing a bit quicker than the others, so he's out there somewhere. And he looks around and he says, I need room to tack. So he calls this bloke, says, I need to tack. So he can yell, he can do hand signals, he can do whatever he likes, but you've got to get the message this way. And this bloke then has to have a decision to make. He either says to this bloke, you tack, or he tacks. In this particular case, he probably has to call this bloke for room to tack. So he'll call this bloke and so on, and then this bloke can tack. Once he's tacked, he's tacked. He's tacked. What happens when the next starboard tackle comes through? They've got to go back, because there's no longer an obstruction. So it then becomes straight port and starboard out here. And everyone's got to tack back again. Unless you're clever and you take your stern. It's a very, very, very good time to take someone's stern.
What about the timing? When somebody calls, if they use the proper call, they'd say, 91 needs room to tack. Can you just say that? You don't actually say that to 27, who's the one you want to... Oi! You know he wouldn't. Anyway, no. How much time has 27 got before he decides to say you tack or tack?
Not a lot, because if 91 then tacks because he's about to hit the wall, then 27's under obligation to avoid it.
And if 91, having tacked because he had to, having called and waited as long as he could, but then tacks, and hits 27, who's been a bit slow responding, who's at fault?
Right, then 191 should have called earlier, you know. 2, it just depends on the timing and the sequence of the calls. I mean, 91 should have called earlier to allow 27 time to, even he might have to call another 3 boats further out, you know. But once 91's tacked, then 27's got to do everything in its power to avoid you.
I'll make it clear that it wasn't actually 27, but I'll still use that for the sake of this discussion. What if 27, as you're sailing along, both yachts, and it is only 2, we're talking about 91 and 27, and they're sailing along and we're getting close to a lee shore, which is the obstruction, which is a wall. You're sailing fairly parallel to it, and each of you are pinching, trying to not have to tack, because that was the favoured side of the course. At one stage, 27 says, let me know when you want to tack. And 91 thinks, oh, he must know something I don't, we're about to go aground here. So I said, okay, water, and he doesn't respond, and I hit him. Who's the boss there?
One you call wasn't correct.
Well, I called in the vernacular that he would understand.
It's both boats are under an obligation not to collide with one another. So the calls should be made in sufficient time to allow the windward boat room to tack.
Yeah, well, effectively I called as soon as he made me aware of the possible need to tack. Up till then, I was just going to ghost it and hopefully not hit the wall.
I wouldn't like to defend your position in a crazy because you didn't give him enough time to respond, basically.
Even though okay.
Even though you had the discussion,
yeah.
It wasn't actually a call for room.
Till then.
You know, you were talking about, we're
going
to have to think about this shortly, and you know,
okay.
You know, then you actually have to make the official call.
You could call earlier and say we're coming up to a wall. Because if you do that, very often it happens in a place called Kawana. You start on the line, you're coming to a wall, there might be 5 or 6 boats, and they're pretty close together, and the person who's coming into the wall has to call. You call long before you get there, because someone's got the party. You go, we're coming into a situation where we're going to tack off the wall, and then you call room to tack, and then your room, all the boats are close, straight off the start line.
The real answer to that is you can't call and tack at the same time. You know, so you have to call with sufficient room to allow that to happen. And if you don't do that, then tough, you're in trouble.
There's obviously 5 or 6 or 7 boats right to the windward of you. And the first one, if he has to tack, all the others have to tack as well.
I mean, if you know, I was talking earlier about sailing the course and knowing, you know, where the starboard tack is going to be and, you know, that sort of thing. And this is exactly the same. You know, if you're sailing along in conditions like that and you're not aware that the leeward boat's going to call shortly for room to tack, then you've got to be not very smart.
What about when he calls real early? Which I have
Well,
seen
then
happen.
that's fine. Then you say you tack. And you take his transom.
Yeah,
No, that's fine. You just say you tack. You know. It's just, you know, it's like you know, if once they've all tacked, and then there's another starboard tacker out there, then it's, you know, a new game. You know, they've got to, you know, all got to tack back on the port and bloodily hit the water again and then call. All right, folks, that's enough for my day.